This is Lethal Gaming Gear's Saturn Pro Mousepad. Now if you know anything about me, then you know exactly why I've been excited to get my hands on this, and that's because it's said to be a direct competitor to the likes of my Zowie GSR and Spire Kamek mousepads. Not to mention of course the elusive Artisan Zero that many put at the tippity top of their tier list. Now I can't say I've used a Zero myself, but that's simply because all of my competitor friends that have them always mention its tendency to trap dust and hair, with many opting to use their easier to obtain SteelSeries QCKs in practice, saving their Zero for tournament play. Now I can think of very little that would turn me into a serial killer, but a few pointy bits stuck to the surface felt when tracking would certainly put me on a dark path to becoming the next Dexter. I'm glad to see this was a focal point in the design of the Saturn Pro though, which pushed me over the edge from I kinda want to try this to I definitely need to try this. Anyway, this is the XL edition. It comes in at 490 by 410mm in size, and it's flat packed, meaning you're presented with a fantastic delivery and unboxing experience, with almost no wait time for it to flatten out on the desk. I say that as mine did still take the night for the furthest most edges to be completely flat, but it's really a non-issue, and they apparently made tweaks during the first batch process, so at least 80% of them should be perfect out of the box. We'll dive into its lightly textured polyester surface shortly, but surrounding it you'll find relatively thin, soft and high quality stitched edging. What's important here is that it also rests lower than the surface, meaning that it doesn't interfere or catch on mouse feet if you overextend during a flick, nor will it catch on any mishap quality control pointed bits or gaps in the bottom of your mouse. This is something that many competitors still struggle to achieve in 2022, and it should help prevent fraying as well, and I really can't see how they could improve it further, so credit where it's due. Beneath the surface, you'll find approximately 3.5mm of XSoft Foam, which I'd say is about the right amount of depth for this density and results in a very comfortable experience with little to no inconsistency when applying downward pressure during more intense situations. I would still advise that you ensure your mouse has a central foot around the sensor, and this is because the theory would depict that as you push down on the mouse, DPI would increase as the sensor gets closer to the surface. I haven't experienced any issues with my prototype mouse, so I've got no complaints, and I'm also glad to see there are no temporary imprints left in the surface after resting my headset on it overnight, something I did experience with the very soft Spire Kamek and the pointy edge of my boom arm, taking around 1 hour to recover. Beneath the foam you'll find an authentic Poron Base, and whilst this does drive up the price, for a lack of better description it's simply best in its class. It's my first time experiencing it, and I mean if it doesn't move on these cheap IKEA mom desks with their super smooth acrylic painted surfaces, then you know you're onto a winner. I've had pads that slip and slide, and with those you usually have to wet or clean the base more often in order for them to grip. Now many manufacturers do still achieve similar results with silicone or plain old rubber, but this Poron stuff clearly works, and just so happens to be one of the reasons that artisan pads are so hyped up. So I guess I'm glad to see it adopted here. If I could change anything about the pad, then it would be aesthetically. Whilst I love the overall design, and whilst the white logo is flush to the surface, I just think it'd look better in a different colour. So perhaps more of a gunmetal grey or Vanta black. It is what it is though, and this way you are able to identify what players are using on camera at events, which is admittedly important when launching a new product line. So moving into what I look for in a pad and how this polyester surface lines up to my preferences, I figured the best way would be to freestyle this section. Now I'm a large cloth pad person through and through, and I want a surface that's both soft to the touch but yet controlled, making it suitable for all types of competitive FPS, and all without ruining mouse feet. Its surface texture should be near smooth for comfort, featuring a weave that's relatively tight, but while still providing a subtle texture that can be felt on skin contact. Funnily enough, this is their exact description of the pad, and this approach ultimately achieves two things in my eyes. Firstly, it prevents dust and hair getting stuck, which as I've mentioned is infuriating, and secondly it prevents a sticky on-the-hand experience, instead enabling smooth initial friction. So by that I mean when you're initiating small and smooth micro adjustments, the part of your fingers which make contact with the pad don't bounce around in the process. This is something I've experienced with a few pads recently, and particularly those that have been advertised as being slightly faster and more resistant to humidity when compared to something like the GSR SE. I typically experience it in general with either too smooth or too abrasive surfaces, i.e. both ends of the spectrum. Now not even a gaming sleeve can combat this issue for me either, as they typically don't extend to the base of my palm nor tip and sides of the pinky. I guess in that respect, when discussing glide and friction, I actually look more at how a surface interacts with my skin than I do the mouse gates. Or at least I value that property just as much, which is something that's not often spoke about in review. The surface should also be close to 1-to-1 both horizontally and vertically in glide for consistency, and in this case it's even, which is great. Finally, the last thing I look for is a pad that doesn't take hours to warm up in the winter, something that can make or break a mouse pad for me. Cold hands are simply a catalyst for bad aim, and certain pads for whatever reason just take a long time to reach a normal temperature. This means that even after you warm up away from the PC, they'll immediately get cold again once you sit down and game. Now, a lot of people discuss humidity and how that can impact the surface feel, especially during the summer months, but for some reason no one ever mentions the winter ones. I think this is just as important, if not more so, and this was the primary reason I couldn't use the Logitech G640 without first putting on a radiator for 20 minutes, eventually saying goodbye. This is something I can't answer today as the minimum temperature outside has been 7 degrees Celsius, so we'll have to see as the year comes to a close and the snow arrives. So what are my final thoughts on the Saturn Pro? Well, let's first address the elephant in the room. Is it worth paying 150% of the price of an easily accessible Zowie GSR? Honestly, sometimes maybe yes, sometimes maybe no. I think if you compete in tactical shooters like CSGO, Valorant or Siege, then the answer to that question is probably not. Now, I'm not saying the GSR is a superior pad, I'm simply saying that it's arguably the perfect pad for those games, and you need not pay more for something different. It also happened to be the perfect pad for me in pretty much every type of game for the longest of times, but that doesn't alter the fact that sometimes I did still find myself wanting a pad that was a touch faster during more intensive tracking situations, and especially for jitter aim in Apex. You'll also want a faster pad if you prefer using heavier mice in general, and only a madman would use a G502 on a GSR, for example. I think this is an important consideration though, since many top players today, and obviously content creators, do bounce around from game to game, myself included. I do think there are a few options out there that offer the improvements and versatility I've wanted, from the Zowie GSR SE to the Spire Kamek and Xtrify GP4 Street. I've tried to swap to all of them in the past, but I've always ended up returning due to reasons such as having to clean the SE more often slippery base on the Kamek, and an admittedly beautiful but still unwanted print on the GP4 Street. There's also the original Saturn as an option if you want to spend less, which comes in at the same price as a GSR and is said to feature the same surface but with a standard base. You could definitely consider this, but my stance would be why settle for the entry-level product where you'll always be left wondering, what if I bought the Pro? Ultimately, I think the Saturn Pro is something that can do it all no matter the genre, whilst coming in a package that, thus far, has suited all of my needs and requirements. It takes the best attributes of all the pads I've used and enjoyed, and comes in a package that I've yet to complain about. I have no issues with initiating movement, nor with micro adjustments, or making directional changes in faster paced titles. So with all that said, thanks to Lethal Gaming Gear for sending out the pad. It's very much appreciated, and from everything I've read online, they're doing great things in the space, so make sure to check them out. Similar to my recent experiences with Wooting, it's hard not to back a company that's as transparent and communicative as they've been, and it's something I want to commend. I do now, however, want to end this video on a slightly weird note though, and that's to say that mousepad reviews in general kind of suck. I typically do my best to avoid reviewing them, and while everyone's preferences are different too, which often make them awkward to both view and create. Now, I've spent a good amount of time watching a bunch of different videos, and I often feel like I'm listening to a bunch of big words, complemented by the use of a thesaurus, mixed in with some key terminology designed to pull you in. This oftentimes results in what can sound like an extract from Newton's first law of motion, but the reality is that whilst many cloth pads might be similar in their properties, even through technical measurements involving static and kinetic friction tests for example, it's not until you actually try the pad for yourself and put surface to skin that you know whether it's for you. A small and measurable difference in testing for one person can instead turn out to completely void the pad in practice for another. So I guess my point is this: if you've used and most importantly enjoyed the largely comparable QCK, GSR, GSR SE, Kamek or GP4 Street, then I think it's safe to say you can trust my thoughts in this review and should definitely consider the Saturn Pro as your next pad. If, however, you've used and hated any of those with fiery passion, then perhaps you'd be better served in finding opinions on a mousepad from another reviewer, as we're obviously different, and that's perfectly okay. There's only one or two questions that remain, and that's how this pad will stand up to the test of time, and whether I'm still using it come Christmas in 2023 during those colder months. Right now I'm enjoying life on the Saturn Pro, but let's see where time takes us. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you like the content, and if you have any questions or comments, then make sure you leave them down below and I'll get back to you. For now though, take care, keep gaming, and I'll see you in the next video.